and just remembered I needed to put the record on. In this call today, I wanted to express the feminine wisdom for today, but honoring and acknowledging that it is both masculine and feminine energy that gives us insight and focus and inspiration and problem solving. It's that integration that is really essential for strong, effective leadership. I also wanted to just comment that the title, Grace in Uncertainty, was, and Erica knows this, the folks from Living Earth Crafts and Earthlight. I came across a book titled Grace in Uncertainty, and a tiny little book, and I picked it out because it was so thin. I thought I could get through this one because I have a stack of about 20 books on my night table. So it's a little book that was written by a designer right here in Monterey. I worked with him on Bernardus Lodge and Quail Resort here in the Monterey Peninsula many, many years ago. Came across this little book, didn't realize it was from Jerry Takagawa, but it has inspired me so much. I've shared it with my Earthlight team and Living Earth Crafts. And so I wanted it to be the title of this session today, because Grace in Uncertainty is about holding the space of the unknown. You know, we are in a time that we have heard over and over again, unprecedented times, you know, challenging times, unknown territory, unchartered territory, and all of this. This is something we have not experienced before. And how do we enter into, how do we step forward into this unchartered territory? What is the mindset? What is mindful leadership? As leaders, we have a responsibility. We have a great responsibility to be mindful, to sustain our alignment and our center as we step forward into this uncharted territory, and with grace. And so it gives me goosebumps to say that, because I think it's so important. And in the conversations I've been having with some of you, and I'm sure you have as well, like a lot of people, many in our spa industry have been furloughed or laid off and have this time where they haven't been working. And it's been very scary, very uncertain, even traumatic for those of you that have lost loved ones. There's a lot of trauma and anxiety and uncertainty of what lies ahead. And so there's very high levels of stress, but beyond what we've experienced just from our fast-paced lives, but just with these unknowns. And many of you have taken the time, you know, we heard the stories about, yeah, I got into my mindful meditation and I did an online program and I got back to my Pilates course and I'm taking this and I'm taking that, and everyone's all excited, or some of us are all excited about all these things that we hadn't had time to do, that we now are giving ourselves the time while we're sheltered in place. And in the shelter in place, there's been this silver lining of, maybe I can reestablish a routine that I wanted. For me, I'm hiking more than I have in a long time because I'm actually home and I'm not on an airplane. And so for each one of you, you've had an opportunity to go inside. And I spoke about that in one of my early messages to, you know, my network, is that, you know, this is a time to go inside and to self-reflect. And it's in this internal alignment and groundedness and centeredness that we are able then to go out into the world and be effective leaders. So I asked the question, what is it that we carry forward? And I made a note to myself that we need to rethink how we re-enter. We need to rethink how we re-enter. And what is this mindset, you know, this consciousness that we step forward into, you know, these uncertain times, and with grace. So this conversation this morning is about that. It's not about COVID response equipment. We did that yesterday with Living Earth Crafts, which is great. It's not about what are the operational protocols, what are our solutions, what equipment, what supplies, what sanitizer, what disinfectant. There are plenty of conversations about that that are essential and crucial to how we reopen our spa businesses. And what we are saying together and with the panelists, our presenters, is that there are plenty of those conversations, but what about the conversation of this space that we are in right now in ourselves, and how do we step forward into this unknown territory in a conscious way. So with that, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to share with us. And we like this to just, be planting the seeds and opening the doors of possibility. In Jerry's book, Grace in Uncertainty, he says that it's in holding that space. I want to just reiterate that in holding the space, it's very uncomfortable, but in holding the space for the unknown is where the infinite possibilities reside and arise. So I'm super excited to share the morning with you and our presenters, Patty Field, Sharon Odaguro, Bonnie Baker, and Maggie Dunphy. And we'll start off with Patty.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you, Tara, again for inviting me to participate. I'm truly honored to be here with all of you. I think that was a wonderful segue into kind of the first of the session here, but I think in looking at the re-entering phase, as you put it, Tara, I think for me, like many of you, when this all came to fruition and we went on furlough, and all of a sudden we went from busy working to nothing. And then you filled your time. In that first week or so, I'm not sure really what I filled my time with. It was kind of a blur thinking back, but it was a little bit surreal, and it's still a bit surreal. But I remember making a conscious decision to move forward. And I started, listening to all the webinars that were coming up in the spa industry, which have been fantastic. And the collaboration has been amazing, and I'm so proud to work for this industry. But I really made a conscious decision to let things flow and unfold. I just allowed, like Tara said, that space to be in and really, kind of move through it. So in thinking, when I was invited to participate and thinking what I wanted to speak about was more of the psychological aspect of where we're moving from and into, and how we're going to do that successfully and as women in leadership. So, we are hearing about spas opening already, which is exciting and full of hope. But I also hope that those leaders were able to take some time to self-reflect. And I think we have an opportunity. There's a majority of us, I think, are waiting to go back to operations. And so we have some time still. Any of you maybe already done these things, but I think for myself included, it's really an opportune time for us to consciously determine how we're going to guide and lead our teams. And we can either stumble along the way, or we can flow with grace and during this opportune time. So in thinking about how I wanted to explain what my thoughts were about, I came up with an acronym, and I used the word LEAD. And I said, leaders engaging authenticity and development. And I think the first portion is probably the most crucial portion, is leaders reflecting, self-reflecting. How much time have you spent, you've had more time probably to really search yourself and really determine, who is your authentic self? What is your core personality? And what are your strengths and opportunities that can help you embody yourself to be a better leader? I think that in order to successfully navigate and lead and provide teams with a sense of security, it's important to be secure in yourself and confident, and know that you are grounded and you have the foundation to lead a team successfully, and allow them to see your vision and be strategic and align with you. I think also, when I was thinking about this, was, letting your teams know what is by the decisions you're making or moving forward, and understanding where you come from and where you have beliefs in your skills as a leader to lead this group. I think a great saying is inspect what you expect, because you're role models for this behavior. So maybe taking a look at that and what does that mean for you. I think also, Tara, you mentioned balance and sustaining that. I think we've all had time to really work, same thing, just being more conscious of your well-being and mindful in your nutrition and spending more time with family and having that time space that maybe you didn't have as much before. So I think really consciously, how do you sustain that going back into the workforce? Because you know it's going to be busier than ever. It's going to be walking in and it's not going to be the same, and you're leading a team. So how can you sustain that? And then once you've had the time to prepare and think of all this, how are you going to communicate this to you? I think that's another part of this that is crucial to visualizing the alignment. The next part of the word would be engaging the teams. Again, I think there's a few ways to do this. I think with engaging teams, it's important to reevaluate everyone. You may have your knowledge of your team, you have your strong performers, and maybe your people that just punch in, punch out. You know, where are they at emotionally right now? And I think there's a couple ways to do this. I think as you re-enter the workplace and you invite your team back on, is to have those one-on-one conversations and really ask the right questions of, you know, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How are your families? Do you have anyone that has experienced the virus, and how does that make you feel? And what are your concerns coming back to the workforce, or excited about? What did you miss? And what are your ideas around wearing masks and gloves? And do you have any ideas about sanitation? I think that engagement one-on-one will show you're present with them and empathetic with them, and you're really making sure that their well is first and foremost the most important thing. There's another way you can do a survey. There's a property that we have in Florida with West End Heavenly Spas, and they did a survey that they gave to all of their team before coming back, really comprehensive, asking all of these types of questions, and they were really able to take all that data, gather it. Once they did come back, they had a team meeting and shared it all. And I think that would be amazing to have the time to do that. And even if you have opened your spas and you're back in, and I still think there's opportunity to do this, and I think it's important. I think having that clear plan will really allow your teams to feel physically and psychologically safe to return to work. We were just on another call yesterday, and Lynn, I know you were on the call too, there's a whole aspect of this mental well-being. This is now what people are talking about is, you know, and they were talking about it before, but I think it's even more apparent coming back that it's really a big part of this that deserves a lot of attention. And really the focus is on the safety and security of your team. So I think being adaptable, having the plan, being able to share it with the team collectively. This is the time to over communicate. Can't communicate enough. I think teams on a different level. I think it's an opportunity for them to come together and bond. I think that's going to take place as well. I also think, and not to forget to celebrate, there's a lot of positives that's coming. We're all coming back together, you know, celebrating their enthusiasm to come back to work and welcoming them back, almost like you're opening the spa again as a new opening. And for those of you who've been on an opening team, you know what that level is like. It's amazing. It's very powerful. And there's a lot of pride coming back. And every day just be present.
Industry, but
be present with everyone when you're there. Be mindful. I think those, you know, we also say it this often, or at least I knew I did when I was in operations to your therapist. You always said, make sure you're present in the room with the guest. Make sure, because they can feel it. And I think now more than ever, that's the same for us. You know, going back into operations, your team's going to feel whether you're present with them or not. They're going to know that. So I think that's a crucial part. And it leads me into the next part of this, which is authenticity. And I think that when others have belief in reliability and there's honest and transparent communication, there's trust. And when you bring that team into that discussion, you create that buy-in and they're part of it and they take ownership to it. So I think it could really create, you know, a bond that's different than you've had before. I know I'm going on time here, Tara. I'm keeping track here. The last part is the development. So this is a time for you to invest in your team. Obviously, all of these things in communication is part of that. but I want to use a quote from Brian Williams, who has so many amazing quotes. But one of them that I think embodies this is, "You are a shaper, a molder, and a curator of talent. Believe it, claim it, manifest it." I think now more than ever, that's true. I think the vibrations that you have and that you take back into the workplace are going to be felt. The universe is going to feel it. They're going to match it. It's that law of attraction. So I think you have the opportunity to reset, practice humility, and power and reward. You're going to be in uncharted territories, as we said, and you're going to continue to learn. So I think all of this is critical in the pursuit of creating a safe space and providing an environment that will foster that positive change and movement forward. And I think that not only your staff is going to feel this, but your customers and guests are going to feel this. They're going to know when they walk into your space and it's full of this positivity and this cohesiveness and collaboration, that they're going to be safe. And I think that's going to be felt as well. It's amazing to see the collaboration that's going on across the world. But I do believe there's an opportunity for a shift in what it means to be an effective and authentic leader. And it's exciting to watch all unfold, particularly for women in leadership. And Tara, if I may, there's one article that I didn't review on here because I didn't have time, but it talks about women in leadership. And I'm going to post it in the chat. I'll put the link in there. It's an incredible, it's from Forbes Women. So I'd like to share that as well. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. That was wonderful. Bonnie's up next. And we'll have some time for some Q&A after the presentations. And so that'll be great. And let's see where Bonnie is.
Thank you. Tara, thank you so much for inviting me. My throat is a little sore this morning, so just bear with me, everyone. I want to be very grateful to everyone who's out there joining us. And just to check in, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so what inspired me about this conversation, about this invitation from Tara, not only was it to join in this great group of ladies, but it is also the immediacy for the need for this conversation, the question of now. So much of the pandemic has been about how immediately we've responded and our reaction and our response and readiness. And we've seen how drastic.
I'm sorry, I just want to interrupt you. Oh, there's your video. It was off for a moment, so I just wanted to make sure you saw you. You're good now.
Do you see me?
Yep. Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
Keep
Sorry.
me posted. Yeah, no problem. So much of this moment in time has been about, especially in the US, about how immediately we responded, or how much we were able to, address the numbers if we had responded a week earlier or a week later, or, how could it have drastically changed the picture? So that got me to thinking quite a bit about this quality of readiness and response, the ability to be in a reactive mode very quickly and very guided by grace, basically. And, that could arguably be missing in our leadership right now. Everybody has a different, understanding of the world around, so we won't go there. But what does that even look like? What does that response ability look like? And that's what led me back to the question of the Sophia and the divine feminine. So, what does it look like? Are we prepared? Do we ever feel prepared enough? It's like becoming a parent. Do we ever really feel prepared for that? I don't know. And, what are some of those latent capacities that are in us that we don't realize until that moment that we're called into them? Parenting, exactly a perfect example, no? So are we even inviting the right people to the leadership table when we talk about leadership at this point in time? Who are in those leadership positions that we count on, that we really say, wow, we feel good about this because we know we can count on somebody, So I do want to acknowledge that we don't have nearly enough time to talk about this particular topic that it deserves. But I do think we can open the floor for future questioning and future discussions. And I believe that this could be really a foremost question for us going forward in the next few years, and collectively as a wellness community. And I am particularly interested right now in how leadership is related to wellness, because more the concept of well-being than the actual wellnessing. In well-being, there's inherently the idea of being and not doing. So in leadership, it's that quality of how I show up, how am I being with my teams in my leadership environments. Where our spas are concerned, I think this means also a responsibility to bring forward the beingness of all people that are coming to us, helping them to find their own inherent qualities and talents and desires, to be able to tap into that. That's what happens for them when they're in a deep, massage or some of these healing spaces. And it's for all the people that we come in contact with, our guests and our colleagues alike. And though we don't always realize it, it is also about being on the earth and being with the being of the earth. So I'm always going to go back to nature for guidance in my own searches. So the ecology and the living of this on this planet. So now I may have lost half of you who are here, who are looking for answers for your ROIs and your protocols to come back into the spas. But if you understand how the being supports the doing and fuels the doing, then you'll stick with it and you'll want more. And I think that's the essential conversation for conscious leadership nowadays. And that leads me to a long time ago, one of my dearest mentors, a woman, she told me to think about leadership like a dinner party. And she said, when you plan a dinner party, you think about the menu, you think about the ingredients, the music, the timing, and you think about who you want to invite. And so with respect to health and wellness and spas, and particularly leadership, I think about who do I want at the table? Who do I want to invite to this dinner party? And who have I not spent enough time with that I should sit next to at the dinner party, right? I don't want to sit always next to the same people. So what values, qualities, and change makers do we need to have? And that's where I make a special point, because the idea of feminine leadership, as Tara mentioned in the very beginning, it doesn't really refer to male and female genders. It refers to something much deeper than that. And it's easy to get lost in the discussion of male and female power roles, a la the Me Too movement and the equality in pay and all of this. But the idea of conscious leadership incorporates the qualities of masculine and feminine, of which, if they were truly understood, then the rest of those issues, those social issues of gender equality, would be easier to manage and easier to balance out. So some may even say that the environment is in there as well, because it's the same mindset that allows for women to be objectified in some ways and to be undervalued, as allows for us to treat the environment as a single commodity or a simple commodity. So with that, that's where the Sophia comes in and represents wisdom. And it represents more appropriately the divine feminine being that is at rest in the deepest parts of ourselves, and it's at rest in the deepest parts of the cosmic interplay. She's in the seed before it sprouts. She's in the movement between the stars. She is the feminine accomplice to the manifest world, and she's been present in ancient wisdoms, from the Egyptians and Isis, Hera, to the Greeks, and many native stories. But in the past 500 years, she has not been invited to the dinner party. So in fact, she was persecuted for showing up in many cases, and she was burned at the stake and called crazy and ignored. And so when we talk about leadership in the modern era, it is about reincorporating those two, masculine and feminine. So it's really not about, are men invited? Is this a male-female question? Absolutely not. It's a reincorporation of our entire being. So we want her to be back at the table, at least in my opinion. So there are so many leaders in the spa industry who are women, so we often think of feminine leadership, feminine leaders. That's, great place for us. We have a tremendous amount of female energy, but I would also offer that leadership comes from wisdom. And wisdom comes from personal experience and commitment. And so being in a leadership position doesn't always make one a leader. Circumstances bring out the leader within. And there are many female leaders emerging today in the world stage. We have, for instance, Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand. You know, she's been really seen as a kind of pivotal leader, and it was said about her, authentic leaders are guided by sound moral convictions and act in accordance with their deeply held values, even under pressure. They are keenly aware of their views, strengths, and weaknesses, and strive to understand how their leadership impacts others. So I don't know if you all are seeing a slide show. Tara, I'm not sure if that's up.
Are you doing a screen share, or you want me to do that for you?
I could actually do that. No, I cannot do that. That's okay.
I can.
We'll just.
Here.
So she's a really interesting example of leadership, a feminine leader at this moment in time in our world. But what are those qualities? And in this epoch, what we're being called to have is this great courage to react. Again, the reacting in the now and the acting in the instant, because we're already prepared internally. We're already prepared from something that we know, our value systems, and we're guided by our highest ideals and inspired by them, and they don't waver. So that is the divine feminine in balance and active in our lives. And that itself creates a field effect and a capacity for true possibility to guide positive change. They also say that her coolness under pressure and self-discipline and decisiveness of her government's response to COVID has led some to call her the most effective national leader in the world. That's interesting. So what is authentic leadership, or what isn't it? Let's start out with, and that would be the next slide, actually, Tara. I'll go through this quickly. What authentic leadership is not about, and this is something that that was just touched on, it's not about being true to yourself in an egotistical way or in a self-satisfying narcissistic way. You know, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just saying not being true to yourself over and above your team or your interaction in the world. It's not a popularity contest. Being a good leader is not always popular. And it takes a lot of criticism sometimes. And it is not always a winning position. Sometimes a good leader has to put their head down and either step aside or step into the fire and take one for the team. So being an authentic leader is not always going to get you stellar, you know, remarks or out there on the world stage. Being an authentic leader is about knowing yourself and knowing your limitations and knowing how much your value systems and capacities can be an example to others. It's also about following a moral compass, about appreciating your own biases, be they cultural or educational, or, you know, where do we come from in our own worldview and our own mindset to be able to lead. And a leader can be open and honest and be very transparent, because that's how you instill that type of connection. So I would say we're moving from an authentic leadership into a conscious leadership, which is where Tara brought us together to discuss. And the conscious leadership is the power to unite. And so that's the power to inspire hope. And that's where Sophia comes back in. And that's not for naught that I named my daughter Sophia. And the feminine leadership is the courage to be in this raw emotional presence, to not always have the answers, the strategy, the business plan, those things that are based on our known models of action and that house an old way of thinking and doing. But to stand in the face of the unknown at this moment in time, in the perfect equanimity internally, to be able to have hope and still have strength, and to shelter another just because you have the heart coherence to be able to embrace them. That is a different leadership quality. And that's why we're not going back, we're going forward. And so I think as we begin to open our spas again, there are those different qualities that we're bringing back in, and I would welcome them. In the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about that And then I'm almost done. So consciousness is the unity. It is welcoming all of these parts of ourselves back to the table, back into our spas or our wellness centers, and becoming full spectrum leaders that have emotional intelligence and that are able to speak equally to a financial statement as they are to a a grieving colleague or guest or something like that. They're leaders that are looking for long-term solutions, able to respond in the moment, to address the urgent needs, but to think in a nested system about the long-term outcomes and solutions, and in a multidimensional awareness. So we are looking at different aspects of how we interact, and that's, social responsibility and regenerative sustainability comes in there, and a balance of polarities. We're stuck very much in a place in the world right now where it's either or, it's black and white, it's them or me, you or me, them or us. And we are in a place now to begin to balance out those polarities and find the middle way between the yin and the yang. So go on to the next slide. And so now new leaders are slowing life down. We are finding the way to quietly enter into the unknown, and we're coming into this place of whole, where mind, soul, and body, the thinking, feeling, and willing aspects of us, this three part of us, begin to work interactively. And so that is where we're able to find that we're walking in grace. And we're walking in grace. Everyone is accompanied by grace. And the grace comes up in those silent moments, in those quiet moments, in the fact that we're all in shutdown. So as we come back out of shutdown, how to keep grace in there, how to continue to be present. But the leadership is about using that grace to walk into hope and walk into how something greater can govern our lives. And Carolyn May says, this is a test about us. It's not a test about the virus or the divine nature of the universe or the order of nature. That's already there. It's about us and how we respond and how we show up. So that's your leadership. And then we go on, one more. And I'm very grateful. So in this leadership, we must figure out the way to do our mission and not just speak our mission. This is about our superpower. Our superpower is choice. That is the human superpower that nobody else living being on this planet has, our free will. And so our free will brings us into a place of being able to choose through congruence, through wisdom, and through our own courage and having courage. So here we see a beautiful example of being able to look at a different perspective in life. And if you see this beautiful orchid, inside of that orchid, you might be able to see a little being. I find that so inspiring. So we want to welcome back to the table the divine Sophia and the divine aspects of ourselves that are unfolding, those latent capacities. We want to reintegrate the self and the ecology, and so human beings can again be angels for this Mother Earth. We need unwavering courage. We need the wisdom and humility from experience, and we need to listen to others with a heart coherence, that because we're oftentimes not allowed to touch right now, we can still be touching in a heart coherent way. And through that, we'll have the congruency to think, feel, and act in alignment that a true leadership needs. So with that, I believe I am complete.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bonnie. That was really beautiful. I'm going to do a stop share right now. And we have Sharon up next. Let's see, where did Sharon go? Oh.
I think Sharon's on mute.
Is she? Okay. Is that, I'm not seeing her on the.
Okay,
so,
can you hear me?
Sharon?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my apologies. I started talking so quickly, try to keep on time, my apologies. But I was just sharing how grateful I am to be on this panel of wise women, as we all are. And it's perfect to speak right after Bonnie about the divine feminine, the divine Sophia, because when she said that Sophia's at rest in us, it just really struck a chord. Because identity is about how we move into action from the place that we know is the divine feminine in us, right? The divine power that rests within us. And during times of uncertainty, it's when we feel the shaking of our identity. And we forget that identity is actually subjective. It's fluid. It's self-referenced. Identity is not who we are. It's who the society around us constructs and tells us that we are, as well as the beliefs that we put into ourselves in what we want to accomplish in this world. I am a deep study student and practitioner of identity, because in leading my teams, in working through the challenges that they're facing, and working with all the leaders that I'm seeing today struggle with identity, it reminds me of the times that I was able to, through identity, up level into the leader, into the conscious woman, into the mother that I am today. And it's the hope and the dream that I have for all of us to take this time to not be a season of waiting, but a season of, not be a season of wasting during our waiting, but a season of generating in the seed, as Bonnie talks about. And when we're growing in the seed, that growth feels squishy. It feels dark. It feels uncomfortable. It feels like we're alone. But if we understand that that's the natural feeling of growth, and when we break through the soil, who we will be out of this situation, that is the identity that I want us to choose and act into in the future that we create. For me, it was sitting there, putting so much energy into the identity of wellness director, luxury spa consultant, corporate consultant and director. And I sacrificed so much for that identity through my career that I didn't realize that what I was saying was, I'm giving up more of myself, my authentic self, my authentic leadership, because I want to show the world, I want to serve the world. And I couldn't separate myself from that sense of identity until I got the gift of having half my team taken away, of having half my role taken away. And in that space, that, as Bonnie says, the still small voice inside, it said to me, well, you asked for this. This is what you need. And so in that pause, when we pivot, right, we have to pause first and stop. The community is what filled in for me the sense of purpose, the sense of who I was. And they said, Sharon, do you know what happened to me? Sharon, did you know that this happened in my career? Sharon, during this time, that's when I found my deep passion, my sense of purpose, right? We always look for this sense of purpose in our careers, but actually, if I were to give you $1 billion, $1 million, and money was not an issue, you already know what your purpose is, right? It's what you want to do when money is not an issue, who you want to serve, the community that you want to build, when it's about that sense of what's inside you and not who you choose to let society tell you you are, to let the title define you, and to let the sacrifices either mean something or nothing. One of the identities I've chosen recently is the identity of this homeschool mom, the identity of the stay-at-home mom. And I never thought I'd choose it. I know many of us were thrust into that role, right, of a homeschool mom. And my type A personality took me down the rabbit hole of, I'm going to be a content queen. I'm going to create this conscious young leader that's 6 years old. But it brought me back when she, in one exercise, was writing a storybook. And I realized that as she's writing the story of the princess that she wants to be, she feels like she is that princess. But in my perspective, she's not the princess in the story. She's not just the character. She is not just the narrator. She's actually the author of the story, right? And in that separation, that's where the identity can play a role, these personas to perform, that when we put our makeup on and go to work, when we show up as leaders and are being, not doing, as we talk about, as Bonnie spoke about earlier, that's the power of the nimbleness and this identity that we can use with action and not being stagnated and being stuck in where we feel there's no sense of action. So I promised Tara an exercise a thought exercise that I'd like to take you all through. So close your eyes and imagine that you've received the most beautiful gift that you could ever imagine. That this gift is given to you by someone that means a lot to you, that by someone that you admire, by someone that you emulate. And this gift is beautifully packaged. It has a ribbon around it, and it has all the hope of what you want, the anticipation of what's inside this gift box. Now, this gift box is your gift of leadership. And when you open it up, it's empty. What do you feel in that emptiness? Do you feel fear? Do you feel disappointment? Do you feel relief? That gift of leadership is empty because it's waiting for you to fill it back in, to fill it with all your hopes and dreams, all the values, all the things that you stand for, right? And it's the legacy that you want to create. So I want you to put the lid back on that gift box once you've filled it with all your dreams. Put the lid back on and bury it deep inside your chest, deep inside your heart. Put fertile soil around it and nourish it with the supplements that we build to boost our immunity. Nourish it with the sprinkling water and the sunlight. And know that when it's inside of you, it is immune from any factors outside of our control. Because that gift of leadership is what people are going to look to you to bring to the table when we go back and we renorm society, when we take action in the identity as the leader. And when your team comes back, you don't know what you're going to do, but you can know who you're going to be, because that will magnetize them to you. That will bring them, and you will be able to feed them the inspiration, the confidence, the certainty, and the grace in times of trouble, because you are protecting that. It is inside you and it is not separate from you. Okay, so in that exercise, I hope you found some value in bringing identity immunity and recharging your superpowers within, because we all have that goddess within. I want you to email either Tara or myself what those leadership legacies are, because then we will call you and we will email you in 3 months and celebrate in that next season what you've accomplished as a leader. And if I can give you a couple of takeaways, the one is reiterating what Bonnie said. It's about what you, not what you do, but who you choose to be in this time, because we are agents of choice and we create the narrative of the story as the author in our chapter, in our lives. The next thing I want you to do is reach out to community, because immunity is interconnected systems. And if you reach out when you are on that roller coaster of emotion, then reach out and call someone, because I guarantee you that they're either high above you and feeling good that day and can bring you back up, or they're below you. And by serving, you eliminate fear. Fear shrinks our brains, right? And uncertainty, stress decreases our immunity. But if we reach out and we serve, then fear cannot stand. So reach out in community. And the third thing is to declare. If you make a declaration, this is one of my biggest declarations, is being on this panel with such wise women and declaring that as a leader, we have the power to choose and we have the power to change the narrative. That declaration now lives outside of me and cannot be taken back, right? So if you declare who you are as a leader, what you can do, and who you and what you stand for, then that will move you into action and create immunity, because you know, as conscious leaders, as driven leaders, that you will do what you say you're going to do. I am who I say I am. So thank you. Congratulations in being the leader that you already know you are, bringing back that superpower and celebrating yourself as a leader. Mahalo.
Thank you so much, Sharon. That was wonderful. Maggie, bringing it
Hi,
home.
everyone. Sharon, I needed to hear that so badly. Thank you. I can't even breathe right now, actually. Hi, everyone. Again, so blessed and grateful that Tara asked to join me to join this group of incredible women. And before I get started, I just wanted to I'll call it a couple housekeeping things. But one, I've been blessed to be a part of helping iSpa to collect all of that great information that's out there. And I just, there's checklists and the information and the protocols and the resources and the guidance, and being this voice for leaders out there so you can really focus on what we need to do as leaders is our people and us as strong leaders. So I just wanted to say thank you to iSpa and all the organizations that have contributed to that. I also want to mention that I was also blessed to be at leadership with Tara at Sunrise Springs, and it was with 25 amazing women. And I got there a little bit late, and when, everyone had to share, why are you here? Why did you choose to come? And at that particular retreat, I said, I'm here to be a follower. And everyone kind of chuckled a little bit, but I really meant it. And I was there to really listen. And it was really a pivotal part. I've had several pivotal times in my career and as myself as a leadership. And that was one of those, to be able to sit back and really listen and not be expected to have an answer and a solution and, things that we always need to do as leaders. So Tara, I want to thank you for that moment in my growth, and look forward to other ones. And the last thing, and then I'll get onto it, is I'll be referencing something in my talk today called the leadership wheel. And it's a really great exercise, but I only have a small amount of time. So I will post a website, the SOS Spa Project website, where you can go, and I would love to do this little diagnostic tool with you in order to help you get back into the space that you're coming from and really lead from a new space. So now I'll get started. So we have these really great toolkits and checklists, et cetera, which is really fantastic. And now we need to dig into that space that everyone has talked about before me, and that authentic space of leadership. And what really does that mean? We need to rise high and effectively lead differently than we were before, because we're not just leaders as in the same sense. I come from I say I'm just a dumb jock, right? And which is not putting myself down. I just like that term. So maybe it's that masculine side of me. But think about coaches, and if anyone that has done sports, coaches, you go in with a game plan and an idea of what you want to do, and then all your teams, and the other team, and all of a sudden the game plan doesn't work. So you got to shift, you got to put in different players, you got to do all this stuff. And you have to think a little bit differently, and you have to be agile. And so there are some of the things that maybe in our past we didn't necessarily have to do, but as we move forward and into this new space, I really want to make sure we're looking at that, because how you show up is going to impact everyone around you. Your energy, your actions, your words, your body language, your tone. And it's really important now to understand and be cognizant of how we're going to be leading our day-to-day operations, and really recognize that a shift occurs between leading in a space of peace and clarity versus leading in a space of uncertainty, chaos, and crisis. And, as leaders, we're the ones that have all the answers, right? And how many times do we say, absolutely, Jessica Swartley? And then you figure it out, right? And you figure out how to make it happen, because that's what we do. And we're pleasers, and we're here to serve people and to serve our teams. But, we're going to have to come at things a little bit more methodically. But that doesn't mean we can't come from a place in our hearts. It doesn't mean we need to be, strict and black and white. In fact, that's exactly what we don't want to be. And I would be remiss not to have to reach out to our good old friend, Brené Brown. And I have all of her books and have read and listened. And Brené defines a leader as anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes, and has the courage to develop the potential. And she speaks of leaders needing courage, connection, meaning, and I will also add, and grace. And so as we have all this planning that we're doing and preparing, and we have to really be sure we're doing it with intention, compassion, and courage. And this brings me to being a storyteller. Several years ago, I was on one of the most dysfunctional executive committee teams. And we were this really great group of leaders with great intention, but we could not get it together. We could not communicate. It was just a total disconnect. And unfortunately, we were not only ineffective as a group, but more importantly, we were ineffective leaders for our teams, right? Because it all trickles down or trickles up, however you want to look at it. And we were blessed. We had the opportunity to have a facilitator come in, and she put us through this exercise that really helped to explain the why and why our team was unable to communicate. And after going through this, it also showed us how to make it work. And another pivotal point in my leadership was going through this process, which again started as this, like this yucky, cruddy space. It was identified, but this pivotal point was really in the self-awareness as a leader. And it really taught me how to authentically lead and communicate by first understanding ourselves and not coming from a place of fear and proving yourself and ego. And that's when it was this leadership wheel that really not only changed how I communicated and led at work, but also at home, as a friend, as a partner, as an aunt, as a mom, everything that I needed to do. And the really crazy thing with this leadership wheel was it was actually developed by a gentleman named Dr. Rodney Napier. And as this facilitator is going through this, she referenced him. And I stopped and I said, "Are you kidding me? Dr. Napier was my neighbor growing up. And he used to pay us $5 an hour to be, this is pre-computer, so I'm aging myself, to manually, tally up these scores, which was the leadership wheel." And Dr. Napier he's now retired, but he has traveled the world. This leadership wheel is one of the legacies in his toolbox. And he's done work with Exxon, with big corporations. And this little tool really helps to differentiate how you act as a leader and understanding the shift from peace and clarity to chaos and uncertainty. There's a line that's part of the training tool, and it says the most critical success factor of any leader is to know thyself. And I think we've all kind of touched on that on one way or another. And again, I'm going to reference my good friend Brené. I really wish she was my friend. I think we'd like each other. But Brené says our work
She's all
is
our
what our work is what happens in all the moments. Leadership doesn't appear when the script announces it does. It is the hard work of showing up and seeing what's possible. And I will also now go to my other favorite blogger, Seth Godin, who we'll see now next year. And Seth says, your defining moment is whenever you decide it is, and you get a chance to lead every day. Wow. We have a lot of pressure on our shoulders as we re-enter and rethink how we're re-entering our spaces, whether you're a manager, a provider, a concierge, a vendor, a guest. And how we communicate each and every day is really going to make a difference. So the message I want to hope that you take away is understanding and being okay with and accepting that 9 times out of 10, we show up and lead differently in a space of peace and clarity versus chaos and crisis. And in knowing that and understanding that, that shift that occurs is where communication breaks down and the wheels begin to fall off. And the foundation for truly effective leadership and communication is understanding oneself in both peace and in chaos. And when we can recognize this shift and our ability to pause then we can return back to that place of clear and consistent leadership. And so another story, because that's how I get through my day, is telling stories. So I was able to, again, I was so intrigued by this leadership wheel and the effect that it has had on myself as a leader, that I went and became a facilitator. And I've been able to go and do this in many different levels of management, from just massage therapist to massage therapists and providers, I'll say, and the top management and middle management. And the really interesting thing is it's so simple and basic, but what you get out of it is understanding that shift and the ability to get back to that place of really where we lead from. And so my story is, again, I don't want to get into what this leadership wheel, I do, but I don't have 4 hours, but it's, it taps into north, south, east, and west. And so I'll use me as the example, because that's where we learn, right, from ourselves and our screw-ups and our successes. And I'm very north, which means I'm a taskmaster. I like to get things done, but I also lead into the east, and the east shows that that I have this sense of I want to create, and so I want to continually put things out there, and that's the eagle. And so when I'm in a normal state, I am still very task-minded. I still like to get things done. But when I'm stressed, I put everything else aside, and I'm a bull in a china shop. I'm like off the charts in an unhealthy way, right? So it was something that I really had to work on. And this one day I'm at work up at Spruce Peak, and one of the guys came in and he asked me a question, and he looked at me and he said, "Wow, Maggie, you are really north." And he walked out of my office, because what he was saying was, "I'm not talking to you right now. I can't." But what it did for me was it triggered that sense of, if I'm going to truly lead, I need to be leading from that right space. And so the magic to this is recognizing that shift, because when we can recognize it and understand, then we're able to communicate from a place of trust and vulnerability instead of fear. And that's where we absolutely lead from grace. And what happened to me that day, when Ben came in, and it was this simple thing that probably happened all the time before my awareness, was I stopped, I paused, I regrouped, and I went out and I apologized, because I needed to, because how can you lead when you come from that place of fear? And it has really changed the way that I lead. So I'm not sure how I am on time, but I'm getting to the end, and I will promise I won't tell any more stories. But as we re-enter into this new space and time, I really encourage you to take the time to focus on self-awareness, on that inner self, on that inner leader, on that inner that inner person, and really embrace her and love her, and lead confidently from your hearts and not from a place of fear and uncertainty. Sorry, this happens to me. But and I'm using very action words, but we need to continually be leaning into the unknown. We need to continually be listening to our teams and our guests. And we have to never stop learning, changing and being agile and adapting to the ever-changing now. And this is simply a reminder that how you lead authentically is with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. And if you can do that, you are gonna lay the groundwork and the foundation for your teams to really show up and do what they do best. So I'm just gonna end with this. It was so perfect this morning when I was doing my morning meditation and prayer, and I read this message from Mary Magdalene. And she says, "You are not called to be perfect. You are called to become authentic. And this will create the perfection that comes from the inside as opposed to the outside." So go with courage, connection, and grace, and be the authentic leaders you were created to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maggie. That's a beautiful way for us to close the circle. on this conversation this morning. I'd like us to go back to gallery view and videos on, if for those of you that can, and even unmute. And I want to thank Patty and Bonnie, Sharon and Maggie for sharing your wisdom this morning. And we'd like to consider this the opening the doors of a conversation that we can continue to come together and to share in this wisdom, so that we know that together we are stronger, right? And we have the opportunity to touch many who touch many more. So I keep thinking about the impact that we have and how that will affect those that we touch, that are in our sphere. And I want to thank you again for this time and the reminder that this is a practice, it's a daily practice of mindfulness, of consciousness, awakening within. I'm so grateful for your time today and for sharing with us. And if we unmute, I'd like to just give applause to our presenters. Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great job.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank
It was
you.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Great job, ladies. Great job.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you so much for the invite, Sharon. That was awesome.
Thank you, everybody.